Oh, well done, Sauce.
Hey, you like Pez?
It looks like that. Here's Heaney from the boundary line. He's an expert at these. From the boundary line!
Hello and welcome to Behind the Boundary podcast. We are here and up and about for semi-finals footy. We've got Richmond versus St Kilda just tonight. It is a Friday afternoon and we've got Geelong versus Collingwood tomorrow. I'm here with Sauce to talk all about it, and both our teams being in this week. Sauce, don't know how we're feeling.
I'm feeling good. I'm glad that Geelong and St Kilda, won and lost respectively to keep it interesting for us as fans. It's really gracious of Geelong to lose and St Kilda to keep the dream alive. So no, very nervous, Pez. I'm probably proper nerves haven't probably hit yet. Tomorrow they'll start to, and I noticed you as the day's gone on, you're getting a little bit more fidgety, a little bit more angsty. The nerves are creeping in.
Yeah. It's what is it? There's 4 hours or so until game time, and it's not good at all because I'm not as nervous as last week yet because it was against the Bulldogs. We were underdogs, but I thought we were meant to win, and if we lost it, it would have been a failure of a season. It would have been good to make the finals, but to lose to that Bulldogs mob last week would have been really heartbreaking. So got over the line there by 3 points and then play against Richmond, who they beat earlier in the year, but it's going to be a real struggle with Paddy Ryder and Jake Carlisle heading back to Victoria, one for an injury, one for a baby. Tom Lynch coming back in as well, and it's tough. Everyone's written them off, so they've got nothing to lose.
I don't know why you're nervous, mate, because they're coming, Pez. You've been telling me this all year. 2 years now you've been telling me.
I told you as soon as Alan Richardson got the sack, that's when we brought that little soundbite out because Brett Ratten was coming in and the saviour of the club pretty much. First final in 9 years and first win. So absolutely fantastic, amazing, good for the podcast. And you said before, if our teams weren't in at Sauce, we'd still be watching. We'd still be loving the footy because it doesn't matter what happens. You can be upset. I'm still upset from a few games. I've got a 97 game that I remember vividly that I'm really upset about. 2009, a couple in 2010. So it stays with you.
Oh, it definitely does stay with you. And you're right, we would be watching the footy anyway, but it does it makes the week, the build up to it a little bit more exciting when your team's in it and the possibilities of you actually, contending for a premiership and, especially when your teams, have that sort of premiership expectation or, finals expectation, it does make the week leading up to it that just a little bit more enjoyable because your team's involved in all the media, all the footy shows, and you've run through 7 or 8 different scenarios in your head about how you're winning, how you're losing, what's going right, what's going wrong.
Yeah, and this time, usually you'd play, St Kilda especially would play Richmond possibly twice a year in most cases. So only seen them the once this year. Different sort of lineups back then, different sort of teams with Richmond winning 6 on the trot before losing last week to the Brisbane Lions. Saints been in decent form with that GWS win in the last round and beating the Doggies last week, which probably should have been more than 3 points, but we did speak about that in our post-finals week 1 show earlier in the week, Sauce. So, we'll get into the previews, I guess, for these 2 games. It's a big show. It
is a massive show. We are going to go through the previews of the 2 massive games, as we said, Richmond versus St Kilda and Geelong versus Collingwood. But then we're also going to finish the show with another segment, one of the favourites, as we always say, Pez. One of the favourites is #SeasonOver, where we review, obviously, the losers from last week, the Western Bulldogs and the West Coast Eagles. But we need to get things into it. With the whole reason we're here, the whole build-up for the week, everything comes down to the next 2 days. The first game is Richmond versus St Kilda, 7:50 start, Metricon Stadium. The teams were announced last night. Perry, talk us through who the ins and outs are.
Well, you've got Jake Arts is omitted, which surprised me a little bit because he's been up and about for the Tigers this year and a good inclusion. Marbia Chol omitted. That one was foreseen coming with Tom Lynch coming back and Nathan Broad as well coming back to replace Arts. Carlisle managed down to Victoria to see the birth of his 3rd child. Ben Long suspended. They tried to overturn that. Didn't come with that. So, Tom Lynch gets away with punching blokes cheaply throughout the year and gets off with fine after fine after fine. And Ben Long's actually going for the footy and accidentally shoulders him. So you know what? It's a week if it's by the book, by the rules, but it's a final and the bloke got up. McRae got up straight away.
I mean, we didn't even really discuss this on the review show. We were more, the recap show. So we were more focusing on the Saints, holding on and winning. But I actually can't believe that, I saw he was going to get cited. I knew he was going to get the week initial, but I thought as soon as it went to the tribunal that he would come down. I was talking to my dad about this and, another bloke earlier in the week about the bad record that he has that sort of, that puts him out of sort. But the other acts that he'd previously done I thought were reckless and I thought they were out of control. And I thought in this one here, he had a lot of control over it. He did elect to bump, but it was more of a forced election. He had no choice but to bump. You could see him pull away and trying to make sure he was bracing himself. And I thought, how can your bad record go into that when it's a totally different thing? And it's very evident in this bump that he's adjusted his practice.
Well, something my brother always says when we're watching Ben Long, he's going to get suspended every single year with the way he plays, and he's fierce and ferocious around the footy, and the bump could be dead for him in the off season, and they could try and train it out of him. But if they do, I feel like that intensity around the ball will lose, and he'll lose something as a player. So I think you just got to roll with the punches. He got suspended for 4 weeks earlier against Fremantle when he had a big bump there. So
but that one was completely different though, because he jumped, he left the floor, he swung his elbows around, and I'm pretty sure that he actually got cited like 2 plays earlier for a reckless misconduct as well. So I think it was a total of 4 for 2 charges in the one match. But this time's completely different, and I know we're talking about it when we're meant to be previewing, but I was blown away by that, and we didn't properly address it, I think, last week.
Oh, we didn't, because we both thought, you know what, they're going to go in the tribunal and it's going to come off, so there's no point mentioning it because it's going to be no news anyway, so we weren't going to waste the listeners' time. But when it didn't happen, it's there. So it's interesting to hear that from you as a Geelong supporter. I don't want to be biased about it or anything, but I feel like I'm not really biased ever when it comes to things like free kicks, things like suspensions and things like that. So I think he should have got off, should have got a warning or a fine or whatever they call it these days, especially with the things that have happened in the year.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting the next couple of weeks, especially, in tonight's game and especially next week, what things are getting cited and what things are not. Because I felt like over the last month or so, the tribunal's been really quiet. There hasn't been any really big incidences. This one here sort of came out of the blue, and as you said, he does have that sort of reputation of playing that wild, sort of aggressive football, which you need, which is probably the only reason he gets a regular game in the squad because of that intensity. It'd be really interesting to see if they build that consistency through the final series.
Yeah, quick question without notice relating to that. If that wasn't Ben Long and that was last week in a loss and it was Dustin Martin, does he get a week?
We know the answer here. I think actually anyone in that Richmond squad, that same sort of play, same with the Collingwood squad, same with probably your West Coast squad maybe, they're all getting off. I think that the teams that suffer in this would be St Kilda, obviously the Doggies. I think Geelong would suffer. Probably also someone like, who's the other finalist I'm missing? Brisbane. And I think it's definitely in this scenario and the scenarios we're going to see going forward, it's who you are, what impact you play on your team winning and competing for a premiership, and also, who the AFL want to win. They want big teams, big games in there to be a big showcase for their Brisbane final.
Yeah, and I don't want to see players like Dustin Martin and Nathan Fyfe, if Fremantle are in the finals, miss games for things like that. So you shouldn't see lesser named players miss games for things like that anyway. But he's not playing tonight, so they're going to have to do without him. Paddy Ryder injured as well, which was a really sad story. We spoke about that in depth in the recap show. Josh Battle comes in, good inclusion. Jonathan Marsh comes in, a little bit worried about him, and Shane Savage has been the missing player this year. I thought he should have been getting a regular game, but he's been missing, but he gets to come in because of Ben Long's suspension, so hopefully he can perform. Yeah,
only played the 2 games this year. He's one of those players that was a walk-up start probably the last couple of years for most clubs, but unable to get into the lineup, and they haven't actually needed him. But when he has been there, he has been effective, and he's one of those things where he's obviously fallen out of favour with the coach. Really great opportunity for him to prove himself, and definitely has something to offer, I think, that St Kilda lineup.
That's the thing. So what we're going to do here, we're going to come away with a tip at the end of this, and we're going to speak about why you think some of the teams can win, what you think the strengths are, what you think the weaknesses are, and which team has the advantage in which section of the ground.
Well, I think, we'll start off with the Saints because they're obviously the clear underdog in this one. I think the only way the Saints win this is that they do 2 things, that they make sure of their opportunities. Last week against the Doggies, for 3 quarters, they really made sure of their opportunities. And the other one is that they dominate those stoppages. Richmond are so effective off stoppages, and we saw it last week against Brisbane. Almost every time they went from a stoppage, they would clear the ball. They would set up an opportunity for goal. St Kilda do struggle in that area, and they need to make sure that they're going to dominate that. And I don't know how they're going to do that without a ruckman.
Yeah, well, Rowan Marshall's going to have to ruck about 80% of the time. I don't know who's going to go in, if it's going to be Josh Battle or Jonathan Marsh actually giving him a chop out in there. You might even throw Membry in there for a little bit. He's been going around the ground a little bit in the last thing. But I think their intercept marking in that defence is where they really need to go. Losing Carlisle as that third tall is pretty tough for them. So they've got Dougal Howard, who I think may go to Tom Lynch. You've got Jonathan Marsh's name down there. Now, I think it's between Marsh and Battle, who will go to Rewalt. Could be wrong. It could be Wilkie as well. But I think Wilkie goes to either Dustin Martin has Wilkie or Geary on him. That's what will happen. And Dustin Martin will try and push into the midfield, and he'll have to change opponents and things like that. But I think Wilkie might be the best matchup for Martin. And if they can control that across the back line, you don't have to really worry about Rioli and things like that. Could come to bite me. But Ben Patton needs to do some intercept marks and things like that. And they need to use the pace. They need Billings and Brad Hill to run with the ball, take risks, and play through the middle of the ground and try and take those marks on the lead. Yeah,
they definitely need to stick to the football that they've got him into a 35-point lead into that fourth quarter last week. They need to make sure that they not high risk, high reward, but that going at the right time, hitting the first option, and that fast-paced ball movement that really made them exciting to watch, throughout the year, but especially in that final. Some of those ball movements, and I was watching it with mum and dad, and it was like everything was going right for them. But it wasn't just because of lucky bounce. They were setting themselves up. They were putting them in the right spots. They had this sense of belief, and they need to go in with that belief tonight if they're going to make it a decent crack at Richmond.
Yeah, Rowan Marshall's a big key, because in the ruck last week, Paddy Ryder, he would have got the 3 Brownlow votes, as we said, and we dominated in the clearances due to Paddy Ryder and really curtailed the influence of the Bulldogs midfield for 3 quarters. So if you can do that to Richmond and you can get the hit outs as they go, I'm not as confident that Rowan Marshall can do that yet as a developing ruckman. He's played a lot up forward as well. So hopefully he can, but if they get the ball going forward, you just put your eyes up there, you can just blaze away, because you've got Max King down there, and that's what they've got to do. Max King takes 2 or 3 opponents every single time. If he doesn't mark the ball with his outstanding reach, he'll bring that ball to ground.
Yeah, and that's where the Saints need to capitalise. They need to make sure that Max King is getting a great exposure to the football and putting in all opportunity for him to be able to score a couple of snags. For me, he needs to be scoring 2 or 3 goals for St Kilda to be in this. But the opportunities that it doesn't actually take the mark, you got those crummers there picking up the ball. Dan Butler, needs to kick a goal against his old squad, and he was, there were a range of other sort of out the back goals that you got last week through like Loney and Butler, and some of those other little crumbing sort of players that you need to capitalise on. Every time it goes forward for you, you can't waste opportunities, because we saw last week with Brisbane, every time Richmond go forward, they score. And if you're not going to stop them scoring in such big consistency, but you need to make sure that you're keeping up with them and you're scoring every time you go forward.
Yeah, they've got to, exactly. You got to take your opportunities. It's a final. You got to kick straight. You got to do all these things. You got to do them right, because if Richmond do get a run along, they're that kind of team that will get that 3-4 goal lead, and then they'll just hold it up. They won't go as fast. They'll defend really well, and you won't have a chance of coming back. So Dean Kent's really important up there. He needs to put a lot of pressure on. You got Sinclair through the middle of the ground as well, who will need to play a big game. Caulfield, Patton with the intercept marks. Dan Hanbury, absolutely outstanding game last week. He doesn't play too much percentage of game time on the ground, because he's always off with a bung shoulder or something. But when he's on the ground, he is super important player. He's got finals experience. He makes the smart kick. He gets the ball. He's a tough padre, and just love watching him play.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, on the counter, we're about to talk about Richmond, how Richmond can. Richmond don't really need to do much except for put out their full squad, basically. They really missed Lynch last week, and they missed the game plan that they have of when Lynch is there, that marking forward. They only took 5 marks in their forward 50 in the first half, which is incredible. Like, it's something that, is un-Richmond-like. They need to make sure that their big players stand up in moments. Last week, we talked about, Prestia and Martin going missing in that last quarter. But realistically, to me, it all comes down to that forward line and, letting loose Rewalt and, giving Lynch first delivery at the ball, great delivery, and just letting the man do his job and kick goals.
Yeah, well, both of those players play better with each other in the side because they get more opportunity and better opportunity. Because we saw last week, Rewalt wasn't able to have a massive influence. He kicked 2 goals too, but they were able to cover him off a lot more because they didn't have to focus on another big forward in Tom Lynch. I think you talk about their forward line there. I think the smaller forwards are pretty important with Castagna and Rioli to pop up and kick a few goals. You got Pickett and probably Bolton running from the wing as well, who can get a couple of shots on goal, because I think St Kilda will be focused on the Twin Towers up there, the Lynch and Rewalt. But the other strength of Richmond, well, they've got a lot of strengths. You look at the midfield.
Where do you want to start?
But I'm starting at the back line, because you look at that back line, you've got Dylan Grimes, amazing defender, Bolter, who's made a name for himself this year, Asprey as well, and then you got Vlosten as like a 4th defender. So if you're going to play against a big side like St Kilda in the forward line, they've got the defenders to do that. They've got Baker, who runs off, and Hawley, who runs off and is very, very damaging as well. And they've got other players that can run back and, kind of help out with Broad and Short when they need to get the ball out of there. So they can double team, they can triple team Max King at some points, and if he doesn't get a run at the ball and they can stop that, they pretty much stop St Kilda.
Yeah, and we definitely saw that last week, what they were trying to do by sticking, free up Grimes behind the ball to sort of anchor that down. Anchor that up the field, and that definitely will happen again. Tonight, if King does get triple teamed or whatever sort of things, St Kilda will they'll have their opportunities, but Richmond want to bring the ball forward from their back line. They're so effective on that counter attack. They make you pay off the turnovers, but they also are really great at setting the ball up from that defensive line, almost to the point where it doesn't even matter if Richmond win the clearance or not, because if they get a stop, they're coming back with a structured attack. And as we just spoke about, those Twin Towers, so damaging. But then if the ball does go to the ground, or it comes through the middle of the ground, there's so many different ways they can hit you. They've got those long kicks. You've got Dusty Martin streaming forward, who's an amazing kick on the run. Prestia, you've talked about Bolton, Rioli and Marlon Pickett. They're also quite good at pings. Castagna's definitely going to pop up for a goal. He always seems to pop up for one.
Yeah, he'll be left alone at some stage inside the forward 50, take a uncontested chest mark and go back and slot it. But hopefully that doesn't happen. But you do mention the ball coming to ground, and I think that's the biggest thing. St Kilda do need to set up around their forward line to really attack that footy when it comes in at full pace. Dan Butler's done it a couple of times this year, and then just get that easy goal. Now, St Kilda have been really good at kicking goals from 0 to 20 metres out this year. Richmond are going to need to stop that. So last time they played against each other, Sauce, it was St Kilda 26-point win as well, which I wouldn't read too much into it, but St Kilda did get the chocolates that day.
So what do you tip? What's your tip for this night then?
Go the Saints. We'll win by 5+ goals. What do you reckon?
5+ goals. I actually don't mind the Saints. I've spoken to you throughout the week about this one. I think the Saints, if you had a full squad, I'd be definitely backing you in to win. I think you'll be extremely competitive. We did see some things, and we have seen some things building for Richmond, which are really un-Richmond-like. I think the Tigers get it done. I'm under 15 points, but I wouldn't be surprised if St Kilda take into a big lead fourth quarter and unfortunately let it slip away. If they go in with a big lead on tonight, St Kilda into that fourth quarter, it is not dead, and I wouldn't be surprised if they get overrun by the Tigers, which if they do, would be extremely hard to beat going forward. But Tigers by about, let's go 10. Let's go 10.
Yeah, well, 10 points. That gives us a chance if you're correct there, Sauce. So St Kilda do need a fast start. They do need to kick straight, and they need to take all of their chances they can get, because this Richmond side is a dynasty, and they've won 2 out of the last 3 flags. And to play them in this semi-final, I would have preferred to be playing Brisbane at the Gabba actually than playing this Richmond side. But hopefully there's a little bit of internal turmoil that hasn't come out yet. There's been a few things that have come out, but Richmond just seem to get over the top of it every single time. So hopefully something's blowing up in there, and something happens and St Kilda can, sneak across the line.
Yeah, most definitely. All right. Have you eased your nerves now, Pez? We've done enough St Kilda talking. We're allowed to move on to something a bit more important.
Oh, I feel like I gave Richmond a pump up more than my Saints in that preview, but you just got to read it as you see it.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, we get into the next matchup, Pez. As we said, the Saturday night game, 7:50 start. Geelong taking on Collingwood. Geelong coming off a disappointing loss last week where they could have won the game easily through kicking straight, and Collingwood kicking amazingly straight and really surprising a lot of people and knocking off the West Coast Eagles.
Yeah, a lot of talk throughout the week with Collingwood's Twitter getting involved with different people online and giving it to them because they wrote them off and everything like that. So Collingwood, I think, lucky to get away with it last week with the 8 goals straight from set shots, and West Coast unlucky, but we don't need to talk about West Coast anymore until our season over segment because they're out of it and they've cost themselves when they're pretty much in their prime, ready to go. So not good for them, good for Collingwood because you get a chance to play against Geelong, and when it's Geelong versus Collingwood, it's not already decided. So Geelong are the favourites, but I think Collingwood are going to really try and pump themselves up for this one, and it's going to be a cracking game at the Gabba.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, let's start off with Geelong. So how did Geelong win it, Pez? What did Geelong need to do in order to win this game?
Do you have any information on any players missing or any changes that are coming up, because the teams aren't out yet?
The teams aren't out yet. You are correct. There has been a lot of news, obviously, in the media this week about Joel Selwood coming off that finger injury. He had one surgery on Monday. He has been running around, but Dangerfield pretty much summed it up. And I don't even need to mention whether he's playing or not. But Dangerfield came out with a quote. Unless his leg was cut off, I reckon he'll be out there. He's been doing around light training this week, running around. The All-Australian captain said that he's going to back him into play. And Joel Selwood, we all knew that he was playing, so I don't even know why I'm carrying on about it. Jack Stephen probably not going to get a call up because he did do his hamstring earlier in the week, last week. So he will be ruled out for the prelim final. Should we get...
You're going to make the prelim?
No, well, he should be if the results go the right way. If you let me finish, mate.
Yep.
For Collingwood, for Geelong, I don't think realistically the team goes in unchanged. The only change they might make is in the ruck, whether they go with Reece Stanley for another week or they bring in Ratugolea. I think
Ratatouille.
I think that they should stick with. I think they definitely should stick with Stanley, but who knows with Chris Scott's selection? He possibly will go in there with no ruckman.
Stanley had a couple of goals last week and pushed forward, so I think Stanley will get the nod over Ratugolea, even though you would have liked to see Ratugolea in that side last week.
It would have been good for a marking presence outside of just the isolated Hawkins, but I don't think that's what we need this week. I would keep the side. I was pretty happy with the side last week. I thought the side was well picked. They had that nice mix of young talent versus experience in there. They picked people on what we needed, not just on experience and name, which is a long time coming for Geelong fans. So I think that the team will go in pretty much unchanged. There may be a late change, if Selwood doesn't get up. But as we've said, he's definitely getting up for that game.
He's definitely playing. And Collingwood, any news on them?
So the big question, I guess, for Collingwood is about their ruck situation. So last week, the media said that Darcy Cameron was in the side helping out Brodie Grundy, but he basically took over in that second half and probably kept him in the game, and a big reason why they actually. Why they actually won the game in the ruck. So it'll be interesting to see whether they go with 2 ruckmen. I would definitely be going with 2 ruckmen and push Brodie Grundy back out the back, help out on that defense, those intercept marks, which he seems to get involved in. And then the other person is Tom Phillips, whether he makes the return or not. He trained about a week and a half ago, starting to get some match fitness into him, but hasn't really had any proper in-game experience. You'd be taking him quite underdone if you do take him in for a do-or-die final.
Yeah, so interesting to see when the teams do come out later this afternoon, early evening. So we talk about the Cats, and the main question, the big question this week is Tom Hawkins and if he's going to kick goals. We've spoken about him in finals lately not having a big impact on the scoreboard, and we've talked about tall forwards not always having a big impact on the scoreboard. So I think for them to win, Hawkins does need to kick a couple of goals, but he does need to get involved in the offense. So even if he doesn't kick goals, he's usually involved in goal assists and things like that. So Hawkins needs to have a big one. Yeah,
and that was definitely scrutinised in the media this week about Tom Hawkins' impact. It's not just goal kicking for him. He is, I'm reading an article earlier in the week, they call it Hawkins Island. Because it is the whole offense is so Hawkins structured, whether he plays up the ground and gets that sort of that start off mark and then, kicks it to the switch and then he goes around and set up his whole structure, whether he's giving off those goal assists or whether he's leading to that favoured pocket of his and snagging a couple of goals. He needs to have a big game, which I'm pretty confident that he can have a big game. I think last week against the West Coast Eagles, the Pies were really celebrated for how well they scored, but I think it was really put to rest how poorly they defended. They had 2 players kicked 3 goals. They had, Oscar Allen kicked 2 goals. They had lots of goal kickers kick, big targets, kick goals. For me, Tom Hawkins will actually have a field day. So he just needs to make sure that he kicks those goals and actually, puts them on the scoreboard. He needs to have 2 or 3 goals and probably 2 or 3 goal assists if Geelong want to be in this game.
Interesting that he's been kept goalless 3 times this year. One was last week. One was against Collingwood earlier in the year. So when Collingwood did win by 22 points.
Yeah, and the one thing that you got to like about Hawkins is he doesn't seem. You don't see that visually frustration in him. You definitely see some nerves when he comes up and kicks those goals. But last week he didn't. He didn't really reflect on it like he was costing the team the game. Like he probably definitely went through his mind, but he doesn't have that visual, that aggression and that, that sort of, I'm costing and I should be kicking these goals, that frustration that you see like Lynch and Riewoldt and even Mason Cox last week when he started falling out of favour in the game.
Yeah, I think Hawkins would be eating him alive this week. I think the competitor that he is, he would have thought, I'm putting that all on my back, that loss. So he's putting more pressure on himself this week. When he gets that first shot at goal, interesting to see how he goes about it. And if he's got that little curve kick that he usually does with the drop punt that goes straight through the middle and get his confidence up and raring to go to kick a bag. But another big-time finals performer, you've got Gary Ablett there at the club. And even though he's at the end of his career where he's in retirement, he has, in the past month, kicked a couple of massive goals from outside 50. So if he can get within range, he's going to have a ping, and he does some really special things in finals.
Yeah, most definitely. We speak a lot about Hawkins like it's the only reason we're going to be successful there. You're right. The other forwards need to shine as well. I mean, Gary Rowan last week and Gary Ablett, both Garys were non-existent in that forward line. Grime Myers, he had an absolute shocker last week. Still getting a lot of the pill, but he couldn't hit targets and he didn't give himself a lot of opportunity in that forward line. And that's the main thing that we're going to, in order for Geelong to win, they need to give themselves and they need to dominate that clearance game and they need to give themselves multiple exposures at the forward 50. We defended Port Adelaide quite well last week. I think any other team playing Port Adelaide last week gets opened up, absolutely dominated, but they can't just kick the ball away and defend. They need to set up their structures, which has been successful this year. They need to give themselves multiple entry points into that forward line. And if Hawkins isn't on, set up another way and set up another scoring opportunity and give someone else an opportunity to score.
I think the thing, if Hawkins isn't on, the thing that Chris Scott has to do, put Dangerfield up forward.
But do it in the second or third quarter.
We
Don't
said the
wait
same
until
thing
the
last
fourth
week.
quarter.
We said the same thing last week, but Hawkins was getting the opportunities throughout the night. But Dangerfield is a very dangerous forward, the All-Australian captain, as you said, this year. And if you put him up forward, I don't know how Collingwood's going to defend that if you can get the ball into him. So the other players that have a bit of pressure on them, Mitch Duncan, Sam Menegola, massive years from them on the wing. And Guthrie in that midfield needs to win some clearances.
Yeah, they definitely had a quiet week last week. But again, I'm not giving excuses, but I think Port Adelaide really dominated that clearance game and they set up that defensive wall which meant every time they got the ball, they were just blazing away Geelong. It's all about structure. It's about winning that first clearance, and you need to really make sure that we're getting clearances and applying pressure because we know that Collingwood are probably going to get first look at the pill. We know Collingwood like to give away a lot of the pill. They need, the other teams that are playing against them are averaging 295 possessions a week. So, we need to be hitting that 300 mark. Control the footy, control the game, and as we've said, give yourself opportunity to score and score.
Yeah,
it sounds simple, but that's the reason that Geelong has struggled in finals. Inaccuracy in front of goal, and they need to capitalise on opportunities.
Yep, and their defence needs to stand up like they have. Harry Taylor down there needs to take care of who's going to play on. Cox, Meyer, check one of them, and really get them out of the game. You've got a big advantage Geelong because Mason Cox is in the other side, so he's not going to have a big influence on the game. And I don't care what anyone says. Yes, he kicked 5 goals against Richmond. He had a massive influence in that prelim final. He had a big influence for a couple of minutes last week and kicked 3 goals and probably ended up getting him over the line, but he's too arrogant. He doesn't bring the ball to ground enough. They can't target him every single time because he's just not a good footy player.
Yeah, and I think it's a good matchup for Geelong, their forward line. I think we, Jordan Ngoe, matches up on blitzars really well. So as long as we're not using blitzars in the ruck as a backup ruckman, then that's fine. I think that Harry Taylor and Jack Henry in the back line, they really contain Cox. I think our defense is an amazing back line. It is a strong defense that and there's a reason that we do limit teams to opportunities. I don't see Cox going nuts like he did. He had 3 great minutes, which is great. Most blokes over the age of 30 be loving 3 great minutes, but I just think that he doesn't get those same opportunities. Geelong are more aware of him. They're going to actually plan for him now, whereas I think last week West Coast wouldn't have planned for him. No one would have planned for Cox.
You can't plan for Cox ever, so I don't know why you would, and that's what caught Richmond off guard that night. I don't know how they didn't adjust.
But the teams are aware of it now. They know that he can break open a game. They know they go to him early, and I think that you're comparing oranges and apples here in terms of the defenses. West Coast, there's a reason that they didn't finish in the top 4, not just not winning away games, but they just didn't have that consistency in their defense as well as their offense.
Yeah, so Brody Mychek as well. He kicked a couple of miracle goals last week, and he's sometimes dangerous to pop up with a few goals. I'm not sure how he'll go into final. DeGoey, he's a big game player though. I did say earlier they beat Geelong earlier in the year by 22 points. That is the game DeGoey kicked 5 goals. So you go from there. It's a tough matchup for anyone.
Massive matchup. And I think the Cats will win. But it's going to be hard. I know how you did it with the Richmond, but we're going to have to talk about how Collingwood can beat Geelong and what they can do, how they can win this game.
Yeah, I don't rate their forward line a lot. I think you've got. I think Elliott might have to play a little bit more time in the forward line to give them another avenue to goal with him and DeGoey up there. I don't think it's going to come from their twin towers in Cox and Myercheck. I think they've got a bit of run in the back line. So Maynard, Quaynor, I like the way Quaynor's been playing. He's pretty confident, and Dacos on the wing is one of my favourite players to watch this year, not just because of his name, but I would love him, and anyone would love him at their club if you see how skillful this bloke is and he gets in the right spots, and really good one to watch. Some of their weaknesses, probably Jaden Stevenson, who's been struggling but still getting a game in there. Chris played a really good game last week, and I think Madgen in the back line is another one of their weaknesses that they could take advantage of, the Cats.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it's really obvious what the Magpies need to do. Every big final that they've won where they've been an underdog, they get out to that quick start. They need to get that quick start. They need to control the ball. Your likes of Pendlebury and Taylor Adams and Crisp, and as you said, that X factor in Dacos. And if Dacos had been playing that form since round 1, he'd be in all Australian contention. So they need to make sure that they get off to a quick start. They're going to get first look at the footy from that ruck stock. Brody Grundy needs to be a lot more involved than he was last week. He needs to have a big one. And then realistically, if they can put themselves in a position to score, whilst we just spoke about how good Geelong's backline is, we know that they can score. Last time they played Geelong, DeGoey got 5 goals out the back. And that's where they're going to get their goals from. Not from the marking forward. It's going to be out the back. Those smaller players need to get a hold of it, and likes of Varco and Dacos even, and those other smaller players need to get there and get their goals.
Yeah, well, it's something that has to happen, because I don't think they're going to get much from Cox and Myercheck, even though they have kicked goals for them in this season. I don't think they can just bomb it from the wing up to that defence for Geelong. I think Geelong could get on top with that. Interesting to see how Geelong do use Tui, if it's a little bit up forward, a little bit in the back line, and because he's a really good kicker around the ground, so that's really important as well. But if they can kick some goals from the boundary line, which I think Geelong will force Collingwood to take goals from, and they can kick accurately from there, they'll give themselves every chance to win. And it's the same down the other end. Geelong, they have to try and get the goals, not from the boundary line this week. They've got to try and get better goals on slighter angles, between 30 and 40 metres out, ideally. And Tom Hawkins can kick straight, kick 2 or 3. They should win the game, and I'm tipping the Cats by about 3 goals.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because it is all dependent on, you've got a team that plays well when they start well, and you've got a team like Geelong that never start well in finals and don't seem to perform. So I think the game in the first quarter will really dictate the rest of the game, but hopefully Geelong can get out to that start and do the things that we've spoken about today in order for them to be successful. I think they have the better list. They're having the better year. They've got a lot more pressure on there. I think there's too many big players there that are not going to be not going to accept a second round exit from how good their season was. Probably having being one of the most informed teams midway through that season, a premiership favourite. I think the Cats get it done, but I think let's go 4 goals. I'll go by 24, mate.
Oh, there we go. A bit of confidence. A lot of pressure on Chris Scott. He has tried to deflect it as much as he can, but a straight sets exit would be disastrous for this club. Well, everyone thought they were going straight sets last year as well, Sauce, if you remember, and they lost that first final and then
They beat Sydney the week after.
pretty comfortably. So they did bounce back then. They have been struggling in finals as their record overall, but in these bounce back games, they do need to come out and do it, and I think they can.
Yeah. You're right. We do struggle in those things, and the finals record isn't great. But I mean, there's still a reason that we finished top 4, and I think that they need to go back to that stuff that made them finish top 4. The brand of footy of containing the ball is different to the way we've played every other year. It's a style that works in finals, holding onto that ball and defending that ball going forward. It's a style that works. We're a different Geelong team. Yes, we lost against Port Adelaide. We lost against the top team. Win this game like you're meant to. Give us all every opportunity next week to beat Brisbane.
Yep, and get you into a prelim. So it's massive stakes on the line. It's one and done. This is just one game. You've got to win it to go, and we're looking forward to it. What we'll be doing, there's our preview for both of the games, and this is our preview show. So if you do want to see what we've got for the cheeky punt, that's going to be another show coming up as well. So we're going to record that one separately, and we will get into our final segment. So for the supporters that are out, so the Doggies and the West Coast Eagles, stick around, and everyone else stick around, because I think we're going to give them a bit of stick, but we're going into season over.
Season over.
Stocks. So we did speak about it. St Kilda were the winners last week, and that means the Dogs are out. And the fans of the show would know, Sauce, that you don't really like the Doggies. So I don't know if the Doggies supporters will be looking forward to your hashtag here, but we're giving the team, this is season over, we're giving them a hashtag because their season is over, and talking a little bit about where they need to go to next.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the Dogs. Let's be honest about that. But I know that all the fans listening who are Doggy supporters, if they're real AFL supporters and they do support their club honestly and openly, then they're going to agree with exactly what I'm saying here. My hashtag for them is laughable dog. Because this season and since they won their premiership, it has been laughable, and then they need to adjust their mindsets if they want to be contending for a premiership. Since they won their premiership, they finished 10th, 13th, 7th with a 50-point loss, and 7th again this year with an early exit. So they finished 7th. It's not good enough. They need to be in finals, not just to make up numbers, and they just seem okay with doing that. They need to really adjust it, and I think it's been a lot of the games early in the year they lost, they were fine with, because it's always like, oh, we'll make a run at the end of the year. No, they need to put themselves in a winning position earlier in the year and have that locked up, with a couple of rounds to go, and that's when they can be successful, because they've got a good young list.
Well, we spoke about that last week, about having to finish in the top 4 to give themselves a real hope. And the reason they were favourites last week, I think a big part of it was because they did win the premiership from 7th, where they played that month of amazing football that they did play in 2016 and came away with a miraculous premiership. But I've got a bit of a hashtag as well, and I think you might like this one. It's hashtag Bruce Almighty, because he was mighty this year, Bruce. He kicked the first goal of the game in that final. He tugged the jumper and said, hey, look, how good is this to be a Bulldog? And then walked off and had an early exit so he can go and do his end-of-season trip and things like that, and go on and enjoy. So thanks for pulling the jumper, Bruce, but St Kilda are still playing and they're not. And I don't think he was the greatest recruit, because he was recruited in the off-season, and he was recruited as their saviour, as their forward saviour. And a lot of experts tipped them to win the premiership and finish top 4, which was ludicrous. And going into the game, so regular season, 17 games for Bruce, kicked 13 goals. 6 of them came in one game. So that shows you what impact he had and what season he had. He hardly touched the footy. He did not do a lot for the Bulldogs, and I think they do need to start looking elsewhere. I don't know why we didn't see Shaki a little bit more. If you're going to, try him in defence or try him up forward, I don't think Josh Bruce is the answer. I think he's a player that can kick you a bag of 5 or 6 in games where they win by 5 or 6 goals or lose by 5 or 6 goals, but he's not that type of player that can come in and really take over a final. So he's not. If you want to win a premiership, he's not the one for there.
Yeah, I knew you'd make it somehow about St Kilda, but you are correct. He had an absolute, not a hopeless season, but it was not what your recruit wants. And from this list that you look at, if you look at the Western Bulldogs list, they've got a lot of talent. Like, you run through these names, some of these players already premiership players, they need to do more, and there needs to be some more accountability from their senior players. Like, we've heard about Marcus Bontempelli for the last couple of years about how, he came out in that premiership season and was an absolute gun, absolute amazing champion. He needs to take that next step. And it's the same with these other players like Jack McRae, Bailey Smith, Bontempelli. Caleb Daniel probably took a massive leap this year, but that's what the rest of the teams need to do. Him and Libba, probably they're the only ones that probably have taken that next step. Bailey Williams, Johannesson, Lockie Hunter, between English and Dunkley, they need to take that next step, and they're just not doing that. And they are beating the teams that they need to beat, but they're not being competitive against top teams.
And I think a reason for that is their ruck. I think everyone's seeing Tim English as an amazing ruckman in the future, but he's not there yet, and he's okay around the ground in some cases. He got dominated last week in the hitouts and around the ground, and I think he needs some support in there. So they need to recruit that mature age type ruckman player to help out that midfield, because their midfield's decent. And I think watching it last week as a St Kilda supporter, I was happy when the ball was in Bontempelli's hands, because him kicking forward, the only thing he can do is kick a 50-metre drop punt up down the line. He doesn't really try and pinpoint targets, and isn't as damaging as a Dustin Martin type or a Nathan Fyfe type. So he does need to go to the next level and improve. One player I was really happy with this year for the Bulldogs was Mitch Wallace going forward.
Yeah.
I think as a third rung forward, he's okay. He ended up being their first target though, so you can't
25 goals for the year.
You can't do that. He can't be kicking you most goals for the year. He's got to be that third type target. So you need someone up there to stand up. I think Norton's got that ability to do that. I think he was a bit hesitant last week with that helmet on his head in the first 3 quarters. He showed what he can do in the fourth, and he's still a young player, about 20 years old. So he will get better. He's one of their forwards. They just need that second forward as well, with Mitch Wallace as that third forward, and they'll have a pretty good forward line too.
Yeah, like they've got some decent names coming through the academy, and there's a couple of big forwards that are coming through for the Western Bulldogs. But you're right, they need to make sure that the players are playing up to that potential. Like, he's your third forward, so that's what he needs to be doing. 25 goals from a third forward is amazing, but it means you need to have other blokes kicking 40 and 30 goals. And that's where they struggle. As I said, they have not taken that next step. They need to take that next step. And a lot of people, like myself, I rated the list, because you look at those names and you're like, they're a good list. They had two All-Australians. They had 3 nominated for the year, and they go out like that. Like, that's ridiculous. And they just need to be better. Next year, I would be saying they need to finish top four next season, or you really need to look at that list and be like, what are we doing?
Yeah. You did speak about who'd you speak about? Liberatore and Daniel for taking a massive step forward, but Bailey Smith as well as a second-year player.
Yep.
He's amazing. He missed 2 goals last week, and if he converts them, it's a different story. But he should be highly sought after by every other club as well.
100%. And I didn't include him in those people that took the next step, because he's a second-year player. He's meant to do that. And probably not at this leaps and bounds. If you looked at if you're doing a most improved award, second-year players don't get involved in it. But he was pivotal for them, and that's what I'm saying. You have someone like him playing the season like he did, with all that other talent, those 4 or 5 year talent in there. They're hitting their prime of their career. We can't just keep living on expectation and potential, which they seem to have, because they snuck that premiership in the first year. And as I've said, in the long run, I think it actually hurts the Western Bulldogs as being a successful club, building a dynasty. Yes, they got a premiership, and yes, that it's great to have a premiership, and people that haven't got a premiership are like, well, who cares? We're bottom out for the next 10 years. But you need to build a successful club through successful culture, and those players, their leadership group, they need to take the next step, because they are in the prime of their careers.
Yeah, and as a St Kilda supporter, I would take a premiership and then finish on the bottom of the ladder for the next 10 years. So Doggy supporters are probably pretty happy with that, but it is time now. It's 2021 coming into. You've got to start to try and get back up there. You're in the competition for a reason. You've got to try and win every year you are in it. So Doggies, season's over. You are done. Hashtags are there, and we move on to the next side.
Yep, we get on to the West Coast Eagles. Now, they had a very up and down season. They were the only team that really seemed to sook the whole season about living in the hub. It didn't work for them, we know. Almost every single media person had them finishing top 4. And I'm pretty sure you and I, Perry, both had them finishing either in the grand final or winning the premiership in some cases. We talk about the West Coast Eagles, and really disappointing for them. Definitely a massive road I guess a roadblock in a premiership window that's definitely starting to close.
Yeah, they've got a couple of players there of age. Josh Kennedy, one of their most important players, getting up there in age, but they do have some decent players on their list, and they should have gone a lot better this year. They finished where they wanted to. Well, not really where they wanted to, but they finished with a home final with teams. They didn't have Elliot Yeo, who's a massive part of that midfield. They were missing a few key pieces. Callie didn't have the season they hoped for. He showed glimpses of really good form, but in that final, he just got shut out. So he got shut out by Greenwood, who tagged him out of the game. So that can't happen to best line players. And if it does, other players need to stand up and do something. So inaccuracy cost them in the end. Finishing fifth, not getting a double chance. This is what happens. So you're inaccurate for one game and you're out. So my hashtag for these West Coast Eagles Sauce is hashtag COVID Hub Kryptonite, because it seemed to get them. And from the start of the season, we heard all about it. I had belief that they would come back and get into form, and they did when they went home. But you're a professional footy club. Yes, it's hard being away from your family, of course. And we understand the sacrifice that the players, the coaches, the umpires, everyone in the AFL system is making to make this competition happen. But the reason they're doing it as well is because they need to live, and it's their job, and that's what they need to do. If my job had to pick up and I had to go interstate for 6 months to do it and to get paid, and I couldn't get another job somewhere else really quickly, I would have to do that to be able to support myself. So you do have to do these things sometimes, and it's really hard, but you're there, you're playing footy, obviously doing something that you're passionate about. And to lose all those games earlier in the year up on the Gold Coast and at the Gabba was just really, really bad. So the COVID Hub Kryptonite, I think, fits pretty well.
Yeah, most definitely. And we're glad you've gone with that one, because I've gone something almost very similar, but a little bit of a double meaning. I've gone hashtag quarantine illegal. Right, and the illegal is with the eagle in there just so I can get my pun going. But what I'm saying is that this quarantine business of only being able to win at home needs to stop. It needs to exit their culture. This is something West Coast has had a bit of a problem for a couple of years, and this is the perfect example of why it's important to be able to beat teams outside of Perth. Yes, it is great to have a home advantage like Perth, and you know what? Yes, make that a fortress, but you cannot, and this has been the West Coast Eagles' problem for a long time, that they're like, we're just going to win all our games in Perth and not worry about the other ones. But they need to start to really develop that, and they need to get that out of their culture, because it's, 10, 15 years now we're still talking about. They only need to win one game in Melbourne for the year.
Yeah, and they did it in 2018 where they came to the MCG and they won a few games at the MCG and performed well against sides like Richmond, sides like Collingwood. So they were able to do it then. But you've got to worry about it at the start of the season and bank a couple of wins outside of your own state, because that'll guarantee you a top four. If they just won one more game, two more games, it's an easy top four finish. And then if they lost last week, they're playing this week. They're playing against Geelong away, or where would they play? At the Gabba,
the Gabba, I guess, which would be a pretty good shot in a normal season. Like, their list stacks up really well against our list, and they beat us earlier in the year, and they would have to go in with a better list. I would say probably not a better list, but a list that could definitely compete. And they were unlucky last week. They went in almost full strength against Collingwood, and Collingwood couldn't miss. And Collingwood, only pipped them by a point. And realistically, they're probably the most unlucky football team to exit in the first round, because Collingwood did play out of their skins. They had 3 players kick multiple goals. You don't say that in a losing side for a losing final. But in saying that, they let too many games go earlier in the year that stopped them from getting a top 4 squad. They lost to Gold Coast. They lost to Sydney. They lost against teams that are no good.
Yeah.
Gold Coast at the start of the year weren't any good when they lost that game. They were no good. And then they did develop into a team that finished 10th.
They got pounded that game as well.
But they got absolutely pounded. They lost to Fremantle. Are you kidding me? That's not on. They did go on a 6-game winning streak at Optus Stadium, or SBS Stadium as we know it, and did resurrect their season. But that mentality, there's no need to revert back to it.
Because, and the point we're making, yes, they lost the final, and that's fine, because you can do it and you can have bad accuracy. It happens. But if they were top 4, it couldn't have happened, because they would guarantee themselves at least the second week of finals. And that game that they lost to the Bulldogs by 2 points with that controversial score review, That's cost them in the end as well, a top 4. But that's not the only thing that's cost them. You mentioned the other games against Fremantle, against Sydney, against Gold Coast. You've got to be able to beat the crap teams in the competition.
Yeah.
If you lose to a couple of them, you pretty much say you can't make top 4 in the end. And they still nearly did.
They finished equal top 4. So one of those wins, they finish 4th. They take on Port Adelaide this week. They're let's say that they lose that, they're playing Collingwood at Perth. So it probably ends in the same result for them anyway. But but I mean, it gives them an opportunity to be there at that double chance. And their list is good. Their list is really good. Their list got stronger. Yes, they did have a lot of injuries this year. They had multiple injuries to, Shuey, McGovern, Redden, Elliot Yeo, as we said. He was having an unbelievable season in there. And there's other players that are affected by those injuries most definitely. Like, we can talk about Kelly. Kelly goes quiet when there isn't a more elite midfield around him. But well, I guess what I'm saying is that those other players need to step up. They've got enough talent from their worst 6 players to their top 6 players to be able to cover that, and they should be beating some of these teams along the way.
Yeah, so their big focus next year, depending on what footy looks like, if it's back to normal or still in this hub type form, they do need to beat the teams that aren't in the top 8. They need to annihilate all of them. They need to just make it a non-issue at the end of the year. They don't want to go down to, all right, we have to win the last 4 games to make the top 4. You don't want to be in a position like that when you've got a list like that. You got Nick Naitanui, the All-Australian ruckman, the best ruckman in the competition, one of the best midfields in the competition, 2-3 forwards in Kennedy, Darling and Ryan. Amazing forward line. Barras down back, McGovern, the best intercept marker in the game. They've got the team to win the premiership. They've wasted a year.
Most definitely wasted a year. And realistically, if they'd gone in with that right mentality, and I know we're harping on about this hub, if they'd gone in with the right mentality, they could have easily sewed up the rest of the season and in SBS. They wouldn't have had to leave Perth until the last week. Yep. If they had set that up, they could have been where they're comfortable. They would have had facing teams off quarantines and coming out of it. It's the perfect situation for them. They really missed an opportunity here. If we're talking about positives for the year, you spoke about it right then and there. Massive year from Darling. Darling had an absolute massive year when Kennedy sort of was a little bit injury-ridden and had some inaccuracy in front of goal. Liam Ryan, absolutely amazing. He's going to be a superstar. They need to make sure they lock him down, which I don't think he's going anywhere, but they need to lock him down for the next couple of years. But at the same time, take advantage of his, eliteness and that spark around the ground. And he, at some stages last week, he was the only thing keeping him in the game.
Yeah, and he's one of the best players in the competition to watch. You got Brad Shepherd, first-time All-Australian in his 11 seasons there. Duggan, I think, shined this year and had a really good season. So
Old Faithful Shannon Hearn,
yeah.
the boot, the big leg, the calf. He's just an absolute, a staple in their side. But if you list off literally their top 10 players, they are potential All-Australians if they're playing at their potential. Gaff, Kelly, Sheed, Shepherd, Duggan, Hearn, Shuey, Redden, Ryan, Naitanui, Yo. And then we have, we get down to like Kennedy and Darling. That's an elite squad, and they need to be doing more than finishing 5th. Yes, they only lost 5 games for the year, but we mentioned 3 losses that they shouldn't have had.
Yep.
And that sets them up in 2nd or 3rd. They win the first week. They beat Brisbane. They beat Richmond. They beat, Port Adelaide at home, full strength firing. They're looking at a grand final, and it's disappointing for them because I think when they popped one early against Collingwood, when they weren't really expected to get there and they were overperformed that season, I think we were really underestimating the talent they've got there, and that should have been return sets back to the premiership every year.
Yeah, they're at least finishing that top 4 and really give yourselves and supporters a real red hot go at it. So West Coast Eagles supporters, our listeners over in Western Australia would be very disappointed. Our listeners over in Western Australia that go for Fremantle would be very happy with that result, I would imagine, with that massive rivalry they got. But disappointing end for the Eagles, and I do like to, try and go for the Eagles, especially against Collingwood in a final. I don't like seeing Collingwood still in it, so not the best.
Yeah, and I guess it probably sounded like we were really harsh on them because they did have a really successful season. They were faced with a lot of adversity because they were probably, the team that was furthest away from home, and they did have a pretty horrible schedule there. But as we said, their window is shutting. Shuey and Naitanui are 31. And, Naitanui was All-Australian form this year. You're not going to get a better setup for a premiership than this year. And for me, a lot of people are saying, it's probably a pass mark for Eagles. For me, it's a failure this year.
yeah, it has to be a fail because they finished 5th and went out. If they won the first final,
Yeah, maybe.
they've got another chance.
Pass mark.
Yeah, they might have got a pass. But you saying Nat Nui is 31 years old this year, geez, that makes me feel old.
Yeah, well, imagine how it makes me feel.
I remember Jack Watts got drafted pick number 1 and Nat Nui went over to the West at pick 2. So
Yeah,
that was
and like
that was not long ago.
Jack Watts retired this year, so he hasn't got many legs left in him, especially with had a bit of an injury-ridden career. For the later end of it, they needed to capitalise.
That's it. All right. So that'll sum up season over. So we'll continue with that segment in the coming weeks, Sauce, when other teams do get eliminated. So hopefully it's not both our teams next week to season over, or else maybe just take that statement back and we won't do it.
Yeah, maybe it'd be podcast over. We might just do that one and just be done.
Hashtag podcast over.
I don't think it's a good one to get that one trending. Hashtag podcast over. But there is one last thing that I want to mention on today's pod, Pez. A big announcement. I'm really happy that I get to announce this. But our man, JB, has been appointed for his second debutant for the final series, and he's made it to the second week with confidence. Look for him in tonight's game, the Richmond St Kilda game. He is the goal umpire, of course. And in the last 3 weeks, no goal reviews, and that's what is getting him the appointment, and that's what's about getting business done.
Jesse Baird, amazing job as the goal umpire. Oh, we said it the other week on the road to umpiring the grand final in his first season.
Called it here.
We did, and it's unbelievable that we have. I can't believe no other media outlets are talking about him. But I do not want to mention the other goal umpire, but I have to. David Roden doesn't have a gig this week.
No. It was emergency last week and didn't get the gig this week. And how could you when JB's putting up absolute gems like that with confidence? Boom. And we need to find out what that actually is, the old salute for the goal, because we can't just keep saying boom and the old finger waggle.
No one can see us. This is a podcast. But yeah, no, that's all right. Jesse Baird, he'll do a good job tonight. He won't review anything, and I've got my faith in him. And David Roden, you cost yourself in that game where you did the review. It was either a behind or out in the full, mate. Just make the call.
Eddie Maguire dug your grave because he carried on about that for a good time, and it was made very known that you were letting it slip. But it's not about the negativity, Pez. We don't work in a deficit model here at the Behind the Boundary. What we do, we're all over our man JB. Stand with JB. Rave those flags.
Get around him tonight. So even if your team, Richmond or St Kilda, lose tonight, you'll have something to cheer about because JB will be there giving the fingers.
Giving the fingers. I like that one better. Giving the fingers, and when he gets eliminated, which is not going to happen, he can give the forks. All right. Well, Pez, we might wrap things up. I know you're super eager to get in tonight's game. I can see the nerves starting there. You're fidgeting, you're fiddling. You'll be all right, mate. Come on, the Saints are coming.
Yeah, get around it. The Saints are coming. Let's get into it. All right. And we'll do our Cheeky Punch show as well. So keep an eye out on that. Follow us on Twitter at Behind the Bound, Instagram at Behind the Bound, Facebook Behind the Boundary Podcast. I'm Pez. Peace out.
I'm still Sauce. We'll catch up next time, guys.